Chaos in Central African Republic. Humanitarian groups say the country is teetering on the brink of collapse after rebels seized power in March. The UN is promising it'll no longer be a forgotten crisis, but what's been done to stem a wave of violence sweeping the nation? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Jane Dutton. It is a country racked by rebellion and coups, and there's growing international concern that the latest takeover has unleashed a wave of violence the new president is unable to control. Rebel leader Michel Djotodia seized power in March, heading an alliance of rebel groups called Seleka. Leaders of the Central Africa regional bloc recognized Djotodia as transitional head of the Central African Republic in April, but stopped short of embracing him as president, expressing concern about his taking of power by force. Human rights groups are now accusing warlords in his rebel coalition of widespread looting, torture, and summary executions, raiding villages and plundering schools, hospitals and government buildings. The UN says the entire population has been affected by the crisis. A third of the 4.6 million population has been displaced, and 1.6 million people are said to be in need of food. But many donor nations are reported to be turning their back on the country. It also remains suspended from the African Union. And there are warnings the growing humanitarian, security, social and economic crisis risks transforming the country into a failed state. We'll go to our panel in a moment, but first I'm joined from Geneva by Mahamane Sizoguro, acting head of the Africa branch of the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. Mahamane, how would you describe the humanitarian situation there?
I think what you could say with regard to the humanitarian situation is, as you just stated, according to the Emergency Relief Coordinator, 50% or more of the population is in need of immediate humanitarian assistance. In addition to the extensive and urgent need, it should be noted that the already stretched public services are barely functional, including in the capital.
Yes, so how difficult or easy is it to bring aid and medical supplies to those who need it?
Well, as I said, there is a risk of major epidemic, and the issue of bringing these goods to the population in need has to do a bit with the security situation on the ground, because you can't deliver if you don't have access to the localities. So that for the timing there is a vacuum in terms of security on the ground.
So the security issues obviously play a big role here. Are you aware of who the perpetrators are behind this violence?
Well, there are from different sorts. Of course, if one has to talk about the human rights situation and who are the perpetrators, if you have to go back to December 2012, when the fight started, then you have two times. The first period up until the March coup d'etat and after March. Of course, before March, you have a number of alleged perpetrators, be it from the government forces, militias, or Seleka, and definitely after the coup in March 2013, it's rather Seleka, but Seleka with different factions of fighting groups that nobody knows exactly who's controlling what.
I believe you've discovered that traditional beliefs are playing a role in the humanitarian situation on the ground. What is it that you're seeing there?
As I said, let me focus more on the human rights situation, but this is an area where an area which is of interest to which I'm covering. So on terms of human rights, we have...
Okay, tell us how people are surviving, those who are not able to get food, those who've been pushed into the bushes, those who've been pushed out of the country.
Well, it's you know, in that type of situation, people develop a lot of surviving tips. You know, from families, relatives in countries around the Central African Republic, or in cities where, or like in the capital, where they have their own relatives. So it's really, all in all, a very difficult situation for the population to cope with this situation. And as I said, the security vacuum is really adding more on the trouble.
Okay, Mahamanane, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate you talking to us about your experience in Central African Republic. Let's bring in our panel now. In the capital of Central African Republic, Bangui, is Leah Koyosum Dumta, Vice President of the country's Parliament of Transition. And joining us from Nairobi is Thierry Vircolon, Central Africa Project Director for the International Crisis Group. Welcome, both of you. Thank you very much for talking to us. Leah Koyosum Dumta, obviously a desperate situation as outlined there by Mahamane Sizoguro. I'm sure you don't need any reminding of how bad it is. Why do you think it's gone so wrong? What's going on?
I think this country, Central African Republic, for many years have been left out by its political leaders. But now the situation is about our army, who is not really playing the role of protecting the population.
Why is that? Why is the army not involved here?
I think it's a question of management, mismanagement of human resource. First, from civilian, there was no problem. But now, when the militaries are not well managed, then they gave up working, and the population is abandoned to himself. It is a situation we are living today. But I can say that since Monday, there had a big, the president had a big meeting with all the officers from the country, calling them to come back, because a new minister of security has been appointed since the trouble the country faced last week. So this new minister is trying to get together all the officers who fled their work, so that they come back
do
and
you now see,
resume
excuse
work.
me, jumping in here, do you see the army working alongside Jotoria's forces, those rebel forces who put him in power? Is that possible?
Sure. They met last Monday, and they had a talk among them at the parliament, because these rebels, many of them are also young Central African, out of work. They thought that taking guns to threaten population is a way to have money. So the new minister and the minister of defense are trying to get them together and so see how to train them. So those who can remain in the army, they will do it. Those who can go back to other work, they can do it. And the officers are getting the task to protect the population.
Okay, well, that certainly seems a positive step. Thierry, paint us a picture of what your experience is of the situation at the moment. I mean, you're hearing about child soldiers there, shops that have been shuttered up, people pushed into the bushes.
Yes, actually, what has changed since the coup in March is that before, insecurity was rife in the Central African Republic, in the provinces of the Central African Republic, and especially in the northeast. But now the insecurity is even in the capital. So last week there were clashes between the Seleka fighters and the population in the well-known district of Boirabe and Boeing in Bangui, and people fled. They were very scared by the Seleka fighters, and a lot of people fled to the airport actually, and wanted to find refuge in the airport because the French army is actually protecting the airport in Bangui. The situation, the security situation in Bangui is very bad, and the coup happened 5 months ago. So we can say that basically 5 months have been wasted. The transitional authorities have been unable and have failed actually to restore security in the capital itself.
If you've got so many rebel fighters who...
part of the legitimacy of the...
If you've got so many rebel fighters who see this as a good opportunity to make money, Leah was telling us that a lot of them are child soldiers who've got these guns and suddenly they're making money. I mean, how do you put a stop to this, and how do you eventually include them in some sort of political process?
Well, I mean, when it comes to the fighters of the Seleka, it's pretty clear that two things must be done. The first one is that a legitimate international force must secure Bangui, and the other one is that a demobilization, disarmament and reintegration program must be set up for those fighters. Most of those fighters are coming from the northeast of the country and should be reintegrated into their communities there. The problem is that there is no rule of law, and public order is completely gone because the state security forces have vanished. Police and the army are gone. So right now the transitional authorities are trying to re-establish the police and the army, and as it was said, the President Jotodia organized a meeting of the military officers plus the Seleka officers to try to form a new army.
Okay, let's take a step back quickly and look at how we got to this situation. Two figures have been at the heart of Central African Republic's recent unrest. Francois Bozize seized power in March 2003 from the elected president, Ange Felix Patasse. A former rebel leader himself, Bozize ruled for 10 years, presenting himself as a builder and a patriot. But a broader alliance of rebel groups called Seleka accused him of failing to honor peace accords signed in 2007. Bozize was removed then by Michel Jotodia, again a rebel leader within Seleka. Jotodia was a civil servant under former President Patasse. He was sworn in as president last month after rebels overran the country, but critics say he has been unable to control the groups he now leads. Leah, how big a problem is that, considering how many groups make up Seleka, and is there any way of controlling them and bringing them all to the table?
I cannot tell you the number of group in the Seleka, but what I can tell you is that after the situation in Boirab and at the airport, the new minister of security appointed has decided the meeting I told you about, and one leader has been shown to them, which is the general of the FACA. And it has been told to all the Selekas, all the other officers, that the only leaders for the soldiers or for the Seleka is the General Dolowai, so that everybody should respect, and with the support of their colleagues from FOMAC and maybe from the MISCA, the incoming MISCA. So this is what I can tell you about this situation. I don't have an idea about the number of Seleka leaders.
Okay, all this plays into the transition process which is underway. You are Vice President of the Parliament of Transition. Tell us how it's going to work. I mean, you don't really have a precedent in the country of leaders being elected and those who are elected staying in power.
Yeah. I think if I feel confident today is that the country has come out with a new charter for this transition, and each institution knows what to do, and it is forbidden to those who are leading the transition to go to election. This is what we did not have in 2003 during the transition with President Bozize. Now, with this environment set up. We have a court, national court for transition. So this body will work with the National Assembly of Transition to bring the country to a normal election. And the body who is looking, taking care of the election will be neutral body to take care of the transition. But the priority is really security, the return of the security to an administration to go up country so that the citizen will be free to get to work.
Thierry, are you confident of this process? I know Leah says that it's a neutral process, but a lot of the government ministers who've been put in to oversee see this all come from up north, where a lot of the rebels come from too.
Well, I think that transition is going to be very, very challenging for several reasons. The first reason is that there are a lot of political divisions, as you highlighted. There are political divisions within the Seleka, and recently Noureddin Adam has been dismissed from his job as Minister of Security. There are also, of course, division between the supporters of the former President Bozizé and the regime and the transitional authorities. President Bozizé reappeared in Paris recently and said that he's ready to, or he's willing to retake power by force. So this is causing, of course, a lot of paranoia. And there is, of course, a high level of unpopularity towards the Michel Djotodia and the Seleka leaders because of the lack of security in the country. In addition to that, there is absolutely no money to restart the state services. All the state services are gone. If you're sick now in Central Africa Republic, there is no medical services. And the NGOs, the humanitarian NGOs, have been forced to downsize their operations because of the lack of security. The elections are supposed to happen in 18 months, but for the elections to happen, you need basic administrative infrastructure. So that will also have to be rebuilt. There are two problems in Central Africa Republic at the moment. The first one is actually to manage the peaceful transition till the election, but the other one is to rebuild a state from scratch, because all state infrastructures is gone.
Okay, I mean, clearly an important country considering its position for a start. It is in the heart of the continent. It shares its borders with Chad, Sudan, South Sudan, Democratic Republic of Congo, Republic of the Congo and Cameroon, and has often suffered from a spillover in violence across its borders. The Republic was a former French colony, gaining its independence in 1960. It remains one of the world's least developed countries after years of military rule and conflict. The average life expectancy is 50. Agriculture accounts for half of its GDP, but it does have diamonds, a source of export revenue and rivalry. All this led the European Commission's humanitarian arm to describe the country as being in a state of a forgotten crisis. Well, as we've been saying, the entire population has been caught up in this crisis, not least the children. The mortality rate for those aged under 5 is now said to be the 6th highest in the world. Nazanin Mashiri reports from Kaga Bandoro in northern Central African Republic.
Deep in the forests of Central African Republic, Kaga Bandoro was one of the first places to fall to a coalition of rebels known as Seleka. They began their advance in December last year. When the fighting started, Hortense Yaligaza took her children into the bush. For months they lived on roots, plants and dirty water. Her youngest son Emmanuel fell ill, so she decided to walk to this hospital. He's malnourished and dehydrated, but now has a good chance of surviving.
Our children are ill and we don't have the money to care for them. These children are our future. If they can grow up, then they can take care of us.
The United Nations says that every 21 minutes a child dies in Central African Republic from preventable diseases, and many more will die without emergency care. During the recent fighting, this was the only functioning hospital for around 140,000 people. But much of the drugs here, as well as the mattresses you can see, were looted by Seleka rebels. Now, things are improving here, but the priority for humanitarian agencies is to get help to people in more remote areas. It's estimated half the population has no access to any medical care. People won't come into town because they're afraid of these Seleka fighters. The local commander says people shouldn't see Seleka as a threat.
Since we got here last December, we haven't killed anyone. We haven't hurt anyone. We haven't forcibly recruited young soldiers. People should just relax.
But Seleka did allow this to happen. These UN warehouses used to be filled with supplies for around 1 million people. Everything has gone.
We need vehicles, we need staff, we need communications equipment, we need people who are going to manage our security. Then we need everything else that goes with it to influence the situation of children and populations who are most needy.
Some schools have reopened thanks to UN help. And in these classrooms there is hope that education can change things. But in Central African Republic, the next battle for control is never far away. There is fear that there will be more fighting, sending these children and their families back into the bush. Nazanin Mashiri, Al Jazeera, Kagabandoro, Central African Republic.
Leah, if you look at the lost generation of children and the humanitarian situation in the country, what sort of future are you looking at now?
The future we are looking at is to take lessons of all these conflicts our country have been facing for so many years, and the victims are just women and children, as you just listened to them, and that was not the first time. And so I think that those who have just taken power, those who are in power today, are those who were among those who suffered. So from this suffering, my hope is that they cannot make the same mistake as the previous leaders, just to stick at the law, just to stick at the protection of the population, and this will be a good way for children to have right to go to school, for people to have right to have health and welfare.
Terry, I mean, you hear stories coming from the country that make you want to weep. Do you think there is the regional desire to pull the Central African Republic back from the brink in order to stop it from becoming a failed state?
No, I don't think so. Since the beginning of this crisis, the economic community of the Central African state is officially in charge of managing and solving the crisis in Central African Republic, and it failed miserably. A couple of months ago, the regional leaders agreed actually to step up their forces in CAR, because there is a African peacekeeping force in the country since 2008, and they stated that they will actually increase the number of troops to 2,000. This is needed actually to secure the capital. Since then, nothing happened. They didn't send more troops. The only thing that happened is that actually Cameroon sent military reinforcement to its borders, because with the flow of refugees from CAR to Cameroon, and also the flow of former military personnel, there are some security incidents at the border between CAR and Cameroon. So the response of the region is definitely poor.
Okay, it's not going to be an easy task, is it? Terry Virkulun with those final words, and Leah Koyasum Dumta, thank you both so much for your time here on Inside Story. And also earlier, speaking to Mahamane Sizoguru, joined us earlier via Skype from Geneva. Don't forget, you can find this program, many more, at aljazeera.com. I'm Jane Dutton. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.